For 3 weeks, veteran Daniel Carter had been walking to the library each morning, checking his email on the public computers, waiting for one response, just one, from the dozens of applications he'd sent out. His service dog, a German shepherd named Ranger, walked beside him through rain or shine. But when a stranger in heels stumbled on the flooded sidewalk one October morning, Daniel did what he'd always done. He helped. What he didn't know was that this woman held his future in her hands. And what happened next didn't just change his life. It proved that sometimes the best interview happens when you're not even trying. The rain came down in sheets that October morning, turning Oak Hill Drive into a river of fallen leaves and regret. Daniel Carter stood under the broken awning of the Cedar Ridge Library, his worn military jacket doing little against the cold that had settled into his bones. Beside him, Ranger shook water from his dark coat, the German shepherd's brown eyes watchful, patient. Inside his backpack, Daniel had exactly one dry shirt, the button-down he'd been keeping pristine for interviews that never came. 23 applications sent, 0 responses. The math was simple and brutal. "Morning, Mr. Carter." Linda Morrison, the librarian, unlocked the front door, her umbrella dripping onto the mat. "Computer's waiting for you." Same routine, same corner desk, same empty inbox. Daniel logged into his email while Ranger settled at his feet, the dog's weight warm against his boots. The library didn't officially allow animals, but Linda had looked at Ranger's service vest that first day and simply nodded. Some things didn't need explaining. 5 new messages, 3 were spam. 1 was an automated rejection from TechCore Solutions. The last was from Cedar Ridge Logistics, the one he'd pinned his hopes on for the past week. His hand trembled as he clicked. "Thank you for your interest. At this time, we've decided to move forward with other candidates who more closely match our requirements." Daniel closed his eyes, breathed, counted to 10 like his VA counselor had taught him. The panic wanted to rise, that familiar tightness in his chest, but Ranger pressed against his leg. Pressure, grounding, purpose. His phone buzzed. Landlord. "Rent was due yesterday. Need it by Friday or I'm filing eviction." Friday was 3 days away. He had $247 in his checking account. Rent was $900. Daniel's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He opened a new browser tab and typed Cedar Ridge Help Wanted. Warehouse positions, all requiring forklift certifications he didn't have. Fast food, overnight shifts that his therapist had specifically warned against. His PTSD didn't do well with sudden noises and fluorescent lights at 2 a.m. "You okay, hun?" Linda appeared beside the desk with a coffee cup. "Brought you some. Black, right? You don't have to—" "Daniel." She set it down with the firmness of someone who'd raised 4 kids. "Just drink the coffee." He wrapped his hands around the warmth. "Thank you." She patted his shoulder and walked away, and Daniel felt the weight of being seen, of being one more struggling veteran that kind people tried to help in small ways that could never quite be enough. Ranger shifted, his nose nudging Daniel's hand. Time to go. The library's computers had a 2-hour limit, and he'd been here for 90 minutes, long enough to confirm what he already knew. Nobody wanted a 31-year-old former Army mechanic whose hands shook when trucks backfired and whose resume had a 3-year gap labeled recovery. He packed his things, the button-down shirt still crisp in its plastic, the folder with printed resumes he'd been carrying for weeks, his laptop charger, though the laptop had died 6 months ago. Outside, the rain hadn't let up. Daniel zipped his jacket and looked down at Ranger. "What do you say, boy? One more loop through downtown before we head back?" Ranger's tail moved once. Agreement, or maybe just loyalty. After 4 years together, the difference didn't matter. They walked past Miller's Diner where the breakfast smells made Daniel's stomach clench. He'd eaten half a can of soup the night before, saved the other half for tonight. The math of poverty was relentless, always dividing, never multiplying. The sidewalk along River Road had flooded where the storm drain clogged. Daniel stepped into the street to go around, Ranger matching his pace with the precision of professional training. Across the intersection, he saw her. A woman in a gray business suit, expensive looking, hurrying through the rain without an umbrella. Her heels caught in the flooded sidewalk, and she stumbled, her purse flying open. papers scattered into the water, mixing with leaves and mud. Daniel didn't think. He jogged across the street, Ranger beside him. "I've got it." The woman reached for her documents, her voice tight with frustration. "Let me help." Daniel was already crouching, pulling soggy papers from the gutter. Quarterly reports, financial statements, the ink running but still readable. "You don't have to—" "I do, actually." He gave her a quick smile, the kind that used to come easier, before. "Can't just stand there." Ranger sat beside the woman, a solid presence in the chaos. She looked at the dog, then at Daniel's worn jacket with its faded army patch, then at the careful way he was smoothing water from her documents. "Your dog. Service dog. He's fine in the rain." Daniel handed her the papers he'd recovered. "You might want to make copies when you get inside." "I have a meeting in—" She checked her watch, a silver thing that probably cost more than Daniel's rent. "Oh God, I have a meeting in 15 minutes. "Where?" "Sterling Tower, 3 blocks. Daniel looked at the flooded sidewalk, at her heels, at the rain that showed no signs of stopping. Then he looked at his backpack, at the button-down shirt he'd been saving. The decision took less than a second. "Here." He pulled out the shirt still in its plastic. "It's clean. You can use it to dry the papers or, I don't know, maybe you can blot the worst of it." She stared at him. "That's your shirt. You need it more than I do. But, please." Daniel pressed it into her hands. "I've got others." He didn't. "Your meeting's more important than me going to the library tomorrow." The woman's eyes, gray he noticed like the suit, searched his face. Looking for the angle, probably. The catch. Daniel knew that look. He'd seen it on enough faces when he'd first come home, when people couldn't quite figure out if he was safe or broken or something in between. "Thank you," she said finally. "Really, thank you." Daniel nodded, water dripping from his hair. "Good luck with your meeting." He turned to go, Ranger falling into the step when her voice stopped him. "Wait. At least, let me—" She reached into her purse. "No!" The word came out sharper than he meant. He softened it with another smile, this one more tired. "Really, it's okay. Just pay it forward sometime." He walked away before she could argue, before he could see whatever she was pulling from her wallet. His pride, battered as it was, wouldn't take money for basic decency. 3 blocks later, standing under the bus stop shelter, Daniel let himself feel the weight of what he'd done. That shirt had cost him $30 at the thrift store. $30 he couldn't afford now, let alone then. It had been his shield, his armor, his last chance to look like someone worth hiring. And he'd given it to a stranger whose name he didn't even know. Ranger pressed against his leg. Daniel scratched behind the dog's ears, finding comfort in the familiar gesture. "We'll figure something out," he told the dog, told himself. "We always do." But as the rain soaked through his jacket and the library closed its doors behind them for the day, Daniel couldn't quite ignore the voice in his head asking the question he'd been avoiding. What happens when always isn't enough? The apartment was cold when Daniel got home. Heat cost money, and money was something he'd rationed down to calories and bus fare. He set his wet backpack by the door, Ranger shaking off one last time before settling on the threadbare rug that served as his bed. Daniel changed into dry clothes. Sweatpants with a hole in the knee, a t-shirt that advertised a 5K he'd run before deployment, back when running felt like joy instead of therapy. He hung his wet jacket on the shower curtain rod and stared at the empty space in his closet where the button-down used to hang. His phone buzzed. Landlord again. "Need to confirm you'll have rent by Friday." Daniel typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, "Working on it." The truth was more complicated. The truth was that he'd been working on it for months, and working on it had gotten him exactly nowhere except deeper into a hole that kept getting wider. He opened the fridge. Half a can of vegetable soup, 4 eggs, a partial gallon of milk that would expire tomorrow. The food bank was open on Thursdays, which meant he had 2 more days to make this last. Daniel fed Ranger first, always first. The dog ate his kibble with workmanlike efficiency, while Daniel heated the soup on the single electric burner that worked. He ate standing up, looking out the window at the rain that hadn't stopped, at the parking lot where his neighbor's kids were playing in puddles despite the cold. They were laughing. Daniel tried to remember the last time anything had felt light enough to laugh about. His phone showed 6:47 p.m. Too early to sleep. Too late to do anything productive. The in-between hours were the worst. Too much time to think, to calculate, to watch the walls close in. He sat on the floor beside Ranger, his back against the couch he'd found on the curb 2 years ago. The dog's warmth was steady, reliable. Daniel focused on that, on breathing, on the moment instead of the mounting disaster of tomorrow and the day after that. "I gave away my interview shirt," he said aloud, "because sometimes naming the fear helped. The only decent shirt I owned." Ranger's tail thumped once against the floor. "And I'd do it again." That was the part that made no sense, even to him. That woman had been a stranger. She didn't owe him anything, and he certainly didn't owe her. But when he closed his eyes, he could still see her papers scattered in the flooded gutter, could see the panic in her face as she calculated what that soggy mess meant for her meeting. He'd simply known he had to help. The same instinct that had made him good at his job in the service, the immediate response to someone in crisis, the inability to walk past a problem he could solve, was the thing that kept getting him in trouble now. You couldn't fix everything, he knew that. The therapist had said it enough times, but knowing and doing were different things. His stomach growled despite the soup. Daniel ignored it. He'd been hungrier before, in the field, during training, during the first weeks back when his mind was so shattered he forgot to eat for days at a time. This was manageable. Everything was manageable until it wasn't. Around 9 p.m., he forced himself to check his email one more time on his phone, burning through data he couldn't afford to waste. Nothing. He opened the job search sites, the same positions he'd already applied to, the same requirements he didn't meet. Experience with inventory management systems, forklift certification, bachelor's degree preferred. He had none of these things. What he had was 6 years maintaining Humvees in the desert, a Purple Heart he kept in a drawer, and hands that could tear down an engine and put it back together blindfolded. None of which translated to the spreadsheets and software that seemed to run every job in Cedar Ridge. Daniel's thumb hovered over the VA website. He should call, should set up another appointment with his counselor, should probably admit that the panic attacks were getting worse again, that he'd woken up 3 nights last week convinced he heard incoming mortars. But calling meant admitting he was failing. Again. He locked his phone and set it face down on the floor. "You know what the worst part is?" he asked Ranger. The dog's ears perked up, attentive. "I don't regret it. The shirt, helping her. I should be angry at myself, right? For being stupid, for giving away something I needed. But I just keep thinking about how she would have walked into that meeting with ruined papers, how that would have felt." Ranger shifted, resting his head on Daniel's leg. "Maybe I'm broken in more ways than one." But even as he said it, Daniel knew it wasn't true. Or maybe it was true in a different way than the doctors meant. He wasn't broken because he helped people. He was broken because the world had somehow become a place where helping people was a luxury he couldn't afford. Sleep came fitfully that night. Daniel dozed on the couch, too tired to make the walk to his bedroom, too restless to fully let go. He dreamed of rain, of papers floating like boats, of a woman's gray eyes asking questions he didn't have answers for. When he woke at 5:30 a.m., the rain had stopped. Thin morning light filtered through the window. Ranger was already awake, watching Daniel with that eternal patience that made him such a good service dog. Daniel's phone showed 2 new emails. His heart jumped, then steadied when he saw they were both spam. Of course they were. He made the eggs last, scrambling all 4 and splitting them with Ranger, even though the dog had his own food. They ate in silence, the apartment warming slightly as the sun climbed. By 7 a.m., Daniel had a plan. It wasn't a good plan, but it was something. He'd walk downtown again, hit the businesses that hadn't posted openings online, ask in person. The shirt wouldn't have mattered for that. Most places would think he was there to rob them if he showed up in a button-down anyway. Better to be honest. Veteran looking for work. Any work. He filled Ranger's water bowl, grabbed his backpack, and stepped into the morning. The air smelled clean after the rain, and the sidewalks steamed as the sun hit standing water. Daniel walked past the library, not open yet, past Miller's Diner where the breakfast crowd was building, past the intersection where he'd helped the woman yesterday. Her papers had left a dark stain on the concrete, visible even now. evidence of a moment that had probably already disappeared from her thoughts, a stranger who'd helped and then vanished. Daniel kept walking. He had 3 days to find $900. The math was impossible, but impossible had never stopped him before. At the corner of River Road and 5th, he paused. Ranger sat without being commanded, the two of them just another fixture of morning traffic, a veteran and his dog, going nowhere in particular, looking for something they couldn't name. "Here we go," Daniel said quietly. "Round 2. And he stepped forward into a day that held no promises, carrying nothing but hope that had grown threadbare from overuse. But hope was all he had left, and he'd learned long ago that sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough. Victoria Sterling sat in the conference room of Sterling Tower, the heater blasting against her damp clothes, her quarterly reports spread across the table like some kind of avant-garde art installation. The papers were still wet around the edges, despite the shirt, the stranger's shirt, that she'd used to blot the worst of the damage. "Victoria?" Her assistant, Michael Thompson, appeared in the doorway. "The board will be here in 10 minutes. Do you need me to print new copies?" "No time." Victoria smoothed her hand over the top page, willing the numbers to stay put. "We'll make do." Michael hesitated. "Are you sure? This is the Q3 review. If the chairman sees—" "Michael?" She looked up, and something in her expression made him stop. "It'll be fine." He retreated, and Victoria was alone again with her ruined reports and her thoughts. The stranger's face kept surfacing in her mind. Not young, early 30s maybe, thin in a way that spoke of missed meals, not fitness. The jacket with the army patch, the service dog, calm and watchful. And those eyes, brown and steady and completely without expectation of reward. When was the last time someone had helped her without wanting something in return? Victoria had built Sterling Logistics from a 2-truck operation her father left her into a company with 200 employees and contracts throughout the tri-state area. She'd learned early that everyone wanted something. Investors wanted returns, employees wanted raises, competitors wanted her market share. Even the charitable organization she donated to wanted her on letterhead, her name attached to their cause. But this man, this veteran whose name she didn't even know, had handed her his only decent shirt and walked away before she could pull money from her wallet. Just pay it forward sometime. The words sat strange in her memory, like finding a foreign object in familiar territory. The board meeting went as well as could be expected with water-stained documents. Chairman Wilson raised his eyebrows at the state of her materials, but said nothing. The numbers spoke for themselves. Q3 had been stellar, expansion was ahead of schedule, and the new warehouse in Pine Valley was already exceeding projections. "Excellent work, Victoria," Wilson said as they filed out 2 hours later. "Though I have to ask, what happened to your reports?" "Flash flood on River Road," Victoria said. "Lost half of them to a backed-up storm drain." "And you didn't think to go back for fresh copies?" Victoria thought about the stranger crouching in the gutter, his hands sure and careful despite the rain. "I made it work," she said instead. Later, in her office with its view of Cedar Ridge stretching below, Victoria found herself still thinking about the encounter. She opened her laptop and pulled up the HR database, scanning through recent applications. 23 new submissions in the past week. She filtered for veterans, 7 candidates. But none of the faces matched the man from the rain. "Michael," she called through the open door. "The applications we rejected last week, do we still have them?" He appeared with his tablet. "Of course. What are you looking for?" "Veterans. Specifically—" She paused. What was she looking for? A thin man with a service dog and kind eyes? Anyone with military experience who applied recently? Michael scrolled. "We had 12 veteran applicants this month. 3 made it to interviews. The rest— Why were the others rejected? Usual reasons: insufficient experience, gaps in employment, lack of specific certifications. Pull all 12 files. I want to review them." Michael's professional mask slipped just slightly. "All of them?" "Yes." "Victoria, most of these candidates— I know what I'm asking. Pull the files." He disappeared, and Victoria turned back to her window. The rain had left everything polished and new-looking, the autumn light making the wet streets gleam. She'd built her company on principles her father had taught her. Work hard, deliver results, and never let sentiment cloud judgment. Those principles had made Sterling Logistics successful. They'd also made it efficient, streamlined, and completely unforgiving of anyone who didn't fit the exact profile of what they needed. How many capable people had she passed over because they had gaps in their resumes? Because they lacked certifications that could be learned? Because they'd taken time to recover from things she couldn't begin to imagine? Michael returned with a folder. 12 files, as requested. Though I should mention, thank you, Michael. That'll be all. He left and Victoria opened the folder. 12 faces looked back at her from attached photos, 12 service records, 12 summaries of capabilities that her HR algorithm had deemed insufficient. The third file made her pause. Daniel Carter, age 31, Army veteran, 75th Ranger Regiment, 6 years as a mechanic, honorably discharged, 3-year gap listed as medical recovery. Applied for warehouse supervisor position, rejected due to insufficient experience with inventory software. The attached photo was a standard headshot, but something in the eyes, steady, honest, made her breath catch. It might not be him. Dozens of veterans lived in Cedar Ridge, maybe hundreds, but something in her gut said this was the man who'd helped her in the rain. Victoria pulled up his application. He'd listed a phone number, an address on the north side of town, and a reference, Linda Morrison at Cedar Ridge Library. She picked up her office phone, then set it down again. What would she even say? Thank you for the shirt. Come work for me as payment for basic human decency? Neither felt right. Victoria closed the file and opened her email instead. She typed quickly before she could second-guess herself. Michael, schedule interviews for all 12 veteran candidates we recently rejected. Use the position titles they applied for, but expand the criteria. I want to see everyone in person. She hit send and sat back in her chair. It was possible, likely even, that the man from the rain would never know she'd been looking for him, that he'd walk past Sterling Tower every day and never connect the woman in the flooded street with the company whose rejection email he'd received. But Victoria hadn't built her business by accepting what seemed likely. She'd built it by taking calculated risks, by betting on potential instead of just credentials. And something told her that a man who would give away his only decent shirt to help a stranger in the rain was exactly the kind of person she wanted working for her, whether he knew it yet or not. Thursday morning came with frost on the apartment windows. Daniel woke on the couch again, his neck stiff, Ranger's weight warm against his side. The dog had climbed up sometime in the night, not allowed technically, but Daniel had stopped enforcing rules that only mattered in a world where he had anything left to lose. His phone showed 6:15 a.m. No new emails, no missed calls, no divine intervention that would make rent appear in his bank account. One day until the landlord's deadline. Daniel fed Ranger, then stared at the empty cabinet where his own food should be. The food bank opened at 10 a.m. He'd make the walk, wait in line with everyone else wearing the same expression of managed desperation, accept the canned goods and day-old bread with gratitude that felt increasingly hollow. But first, he had to try. He showered in water that ran cold after 3 minutes, dressed in his least-worn jeans and a flannel shirt that had been his father's. Ranger waited by the door, patient as always. They walked downtown as the sun climbed, burning off the frost. Daniel had a list in his pocket, 12 businesses he hadn't tried yet. Hardware stores, auto shops, the kind of places where maybe, possibly, someone might value his actual skills over the certifications he lacked. Miller's Diner was first. The manager, a woman named Carol Jenkins, listened to his pitch with sympathetic eyes. I wish I could help, hun, but we're actually cutting hours right now. Breakfast crowd's been slow. The hardware store was next, then the auto parts shop, then 3 different warehouses where he was told to apply online, the same online system that had already rejected him. By noon, Daniel's list had 11 check marks and 0 prospects. He sat on a bench in Memorial Park, Ranger at his feet, and ate the granola bar he'd been saving for emergencies. This qualified. Everything qualified now. A text from his landlord. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. If I don't have rent by then, eviction notice gets filed Monday. Daniel closed his eyes and focused on breathing. In for 4 counts. Hold for 7. Out for 8. The exercise was supposed to calm his nervous system. Mostly it just reminded him he was still breathing, which sometimes felt like achievement enough. "Hey, aren't you—" A man approached the bench, middle-aged, wearing a jacket that said Pine Valley Auto Body. "You're the guy from Miller's Diner last month. Fixed Linda Morrison's alternator in the parking lot." Daniel looked up. Yeah, that was me. Heard you did it for free." "It was an alternator. Took 20 minutes. The man extended his hand. "Bill Henderson. I run the body shop on 5th Street. They shook, and Daniel felt the first spark of something that might have been hope. "You looking for work?" "Desperately." Bill laughed, but not unkindly. "I figured. Look, I don't have anything full-time, but I could use someone to help with basic maintenance. Oil changes, brake jobs, that kind of thing. 20 hours a week, 15 an hour, under the table. 300 a week. Not enough for rent, but enough to eat. Enough to keep the lights on while he found something else." "When can I start?" "Monday work for you?" "Monday, after the eviction notice, after everything fell apart." "Actually," Daniel said carefully, "any chance I could start today? Even just a few hours?" Bill studied him, and Daniel saw the calculation happening, the assessment of whether this was a reliable guy or someone who'd take an advance and disappear. "Tell you what," Bill said finally. "Come by at 2 p.m. I've got a Chevy that needs a transmission flush. You show me you know what you're doing, I'll pay you for the full day." "Thank you." Daniel stood, extending his hand again. "Really? Thank you." Bill shook it. "Thank Linda Morrison. She's the one who mentioned you might need work. Said you were good people." After Bill left, Daniel sat back down, his hands shaking slightly. $240 if he worked the rest of the week. Not enough for rent, not nearly enough, but something. A crack in the wall he'd been beating his head against. Ranger pressed against his leg and Daniel scratched the dog's ears. "One day at a time," he murmured. "That's what they say, right?" At 2 p.m., Daniel showed up at Pine Valley Auto Body with his father's old tool belt and a determination that felt like armor. The Chevy was older than he was, with transmission fluid that smelled burnt and a filter that should have been changed 10,000 miles ago. Daniel lost himself in the work, hands moving with muscle memory, mind quiet for the first time in days. This he could do. This he understood. The logic of machinery, the cause and effect, the satisfaction of solving problems that actually had solutions. Bill watched for the first hour, then left him to it, coming back at 5 p.m. when Daniel was buttoning up the final bolts. "Start her up," Bill said. The engine turned over smooth, the transmission shifting through gears like butter instead of grinding metal. Bill nodded. "You're hired, Monday through Friday 2 to 6. I'll pay you Friday afternoons, cash." They shook on it, and Daniel walked home with $80 in his pocket, the day's pay, advanced because Bill happened to have it on hand, which Daniel knew was kindness, disguised as convenience. At the food bank, he accepted the box of canned goods and bread with real gratitude. The volunteer, an older woman who'd seen him before, added an extra jar of peanut butter. "For your dog," she said quietly. Daniel made it home as the sun was setting. He cooked rice with canned vegetables, splitting it with Ranger. The meal was warm and filling, and for 10 minutes, Daniel let himself believe things might actually be okay. Then he checked his bank account. After the $80, $327 total. With tomorrow's work, maybe $400. Still, $500 short of rent. He could ask Bill for more hours. He could sell things, though he had nothing worth selling. He could call the VA, see if there was emergency assistance. He could... His phone buzzed with an email notification. From Sterling Logistics. Subject, interview request, warehouse supervisor position. Daniel stared at the screen, convinced he was misreading. "Dear Mr. Carter, we would like to invite you for an interview for the warehouse supervisor position you applied for. We have openings on Friday at 2 p.m. or Monday at 9 a.m. Please respond to confirm your attendance Friday. Tomorrow." The same day rent was due. Daniel read the email 3 times looking for the catch. But it was real. Official. An actual interview after weeks of rejection. He typed his response with shaking hands. "Friday at 2 p.m. works perfectly. Thank you for the opportunity." After he hit send, Daniel sat on the floor beside Ranger, his back against the couch, and felt something he'd almost forgotten. Not hope, exactly. Hope was too fragile, too easily broken. This was something steadier, the feeling that maybe, possibly, he'd earned a chance to prove he was more than his resume. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Friday arrived with clear skies and the weight of everything balanced on a single afternoon. Daniel worked at the auto shop from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., finishing an oil change and a brake job with efficiency born from nerves. Bill paid him for 4 hours, $60, and told him not to worry about leaving early. "Job interview's more important than my brake pads," Bill said. "Go make us proud." Daniel went home and stared at his closet. No button-down, no interview clothes, just the same flannel shirt and jeans he'd worn all week, now washed and dried, but still unmistakably not office-appropriate. He settled for his cleanest pair of jeans and a navy pullover that didn't have any holes. Ranger watched from his spot on the rug, tail thumping. "I know," Daniel told the dog. "I look like I'm going to Home Depot, not a job interview." But it was what he had. Sterling Logistics occupied the 3rd floor of Sterling Tower, the tallest building in Cedar Ridge. Daniel had walked past it 100 times, never imagining he'd actually be inside. The lobby was all glass and steel, with a security desk that made him sign in and a visitor badge that felt like it was burning through his shirt. "3rd floor, turn right off the elevator," the guard said. "Someone will meet you there." The elevator smelled like expensive cologne and air conditioning. Daniel's reflection in the polished doors showed a man trying very hard to look like he belonged. Ranger sat perfectly at his side, service vest marking him as official, necessary. The elevator doors opened to a reception area that made the lobby look modest. A young woman at the desk smiled professionally. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes, ma'am." "Miss Sterling will be with you in just a moment. Can I get you water, coffee?" "Water would be great, thank you." She returned with a glass bottle of water that probably cost more than Daniel's lunch. He held it carefully, afraid to drink from something that looked too expensive to be disposable. "Mr. Carter?" A man in a gray suit appeared. "I'm Michael Thompson, Miss Sterling's assistant. She's ready for you now." Daniel followed him down a hallway lined with photos, trucks with the Sterling logo, warehouses, smiling employees in branded shirts. At the end of the hall, Michael knocked on a door, then opened it. "Mr. Carter for you." The office was corner-facing, windows on 2 sides showing Cedar Ridge sprawled below. A massive desk held 2 monitors, stacks of papers, and a coffee mug that said, "World's Most Adequate Boss." And behind the desk, standing to greet him, was the woman from the rain. Daniel stopped, actually stopped moving, his brain trying to process what his eyes were seeing. She wore a different suit, navy this time, but the same gray eyes, the same professional posture. Her hair was pulled back and she looked exactly like someone who owned a logistics company. "Mr. Carter." She extended her hand. "Thank you for coming." He shook it automatically, his mouth forgetting how to form words. "Please, sit." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "I hope your week has been better than Monday." Daniel sat. Ranger settled beside the chair, perfectly calm, while Daniel's heart hammered like it was trying to escape. He stopped, started again. "I didn't know that I owned Sterling Logistics." Victoria sat down, something like amusement in her expression. "I don't usually introduce myself by reciting my business holdings, especially not when I'm in a flooded gutter chasing quarterly reports." "Your reports." Daniel felt heat rise in his face. They survived, thanks to you." She pulled the folder from her desk drawer. His application, he realized. "Though I have to say, your resume doesn't mention the skill of document recovery in crisis situations. I'm not sure that's a marketable skill." "It should be." She opened the folder, scanning the contents. 6 years as a mechanic with the 75th Rangers. Honorable discharge. Strong references from your commanding officers. Then a 3-year gap labeled medical recovery. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Yes, ma'am." "What kind of recovery?" Here it was. The moment where he explained the parts that made employers uncomfortable. The nightmares, the panic attacks, the 3 different medications he'd tried before finding a combination that worked. The therapy sessions, the service dog, the slow, painful process of becoming functional again. "PTSD mostly," he said, keeping his voice level. Some physical injuries too, but those healed. The rest took longer. Victoria nodded, her face unreadable. And now? I'm managing it. Ranger helps. He reached down, touching the dog's head. I'm in therapy. I have coping strategies. I'm not... He paused, choosing words carefully. I'm not the same person I was before deployment, but I'm stable. I show up. I work hard. I don't doubt that. Victoria closed the folder. In fact, that's precisely why I wanted to see you again. Daniel's brain was still 3 steps behind. You wanted... The algorithm rejected your application because you lack experience with our inventory management software. She leaned back in her chair, which is a stupid reason to reject someone, frankly. Software can be learned in a week. Character can't be learned at all. She pulled something from her desk, a plastic-wrapped shirt. His shirt, the button-down he'd given her Monday morning. I had it dry cleaned, she said, sliding it across the desk, though I have to admit, returning it feels insufficient. Daniel stared at the shirt. You didn't have to... Mr. Carter. Victoria's voice was firm now, the kind of tone that probably ran board meetings. Do you know how many people walked past me on that sidewalk Monday morning? He shook his head. 7. I counted while I was trying to gather my papers. 7 people saw a woman in a business suit struggling in the rain, and 7 people walked past without stopping. But you... stopped. Yes. And gave me your only interview shirt, which I'm guessing you could not afford to replace. Daniel felt his face heat again. I manage fine. I'm sure you do. She stood, walking to the window. I've spent the last 4 days thinking about that morning, about why you helped, about what it meant. Anyone would have, anyone didn't. You did. She turned back to face him. And then you walked away before I could thank you properly. Before I could offer you money, which would have insulted us both. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. I looked through every veteran application we've received in the past 2 months, Victoria continued. 12 candidates, 12 people we rejected for reasons that suddenly seemed remarkably shallow when I really examined them. Miss Sterling, I'm offering you a job, Mr. Carter. Warehouse supervisor, as you applied for. $45,000 a year, full benefits, 2 weeks paid vacation. She named numbers that made Daniel's vision swim. You'll have a 3-month training period to learn our systems. If you can handle a Humvee transmission, you can handle inventory software. Daniel's mouth opened, closed. I can't. You can, and before you say this is charity or some kind of reward for helping me, let me be clear. Victoria sat back down, her eyes direct. I'm not hiring you because you gave me a shirt. I'm hiring you because someone who gives away his only decent shirt to help a stranger is exactly the kind of person I want working for me. That's judgment. That's character. That's leadership. But I don't have... You have 6 years managing equipment worth millions of dollars in combat zones. You have references that call you reliable, dedicated, and someone who looks out for his team. You have a service dog, which tells me you've faced challenges and had the wisdom to get help. She slid a paper across the desk. What you don't have is someone who's willing to see past the algorithm. Daniel looked at the paper. An official offer letter. His name at the top. A salary that would mean rent, food, maybe even savings. His hands shook as he picked it up. When would I start? Monday, if you're ready. If not, take the weekend. Think about it. I don't need to think about it. The words came out rough. I mean, yes, Monday. Absolutely Monday. Victoria smiled, and it transformed her face from professional to genuinely warm. Good. Welcome to Sterling Logistics, Mr. Carter. They shook hands again, and this time Daniel could feel his future in her grip, solid, real, possible. One condition, Victoria added as he stood to leave. You keep looking out for people. That's what we do here. We move goods, yes, but we also move lives forward. I need people who remember that. Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. At the door, he turned back. Miss Sterling, why did you really look for me? She considered the question. Because I've spent 10 years building this company on efficiency and results. And Monday morning, standing in the rain with ruined reports, I remembered something my father used to say. Results matter, but how you get them matters more. She picked up the coffee mug. World's most adequate boss. You reminded me of that. Daniel left with Ranger at his side, the offer letter in his backpack, and a feeling in his chest that he'd almost forgotten existed. Not relief. Not yet. Relief would come when he signed the papers, when he worked his first day, when the paychecks started coming. This was something better. The feeling that someone had seen him, really seen him, and decided he was worth the risk. Daniel made it 3 blocks before he had to stop. He sat on a bench outside Memorial Park, Ranger pressed against his legs, and stared at the offer letter until the words blurred. $45,000. A year. He'd been trying to scrape together $900 for rent. And now, his phone rang. Landlord. Daniel almost didn't answer. Then he thought about Monday, about walking into a warehouse with his name on official paperwork, about paycheck stubs and direct deposit, and a future that wasn't measured in days until disaster. Hello? Carter, it's 4:30. I need an answer. You have rent by 5 or not? Daniel looked at the offer letter. Monday start date, first paycheck in 2 weeks. The math didn't work, not for today. I need a few more days, he said. I've got a job starting Monday. I can pay you next Friday plus late fees. That's not how this works. You've got until 5 today or I file eviction Monday morning. Please. Daniel hated the sound of his own voice, the begging quality. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a week. 1 week. Silence on the line. Then, you really got a job? Sterling Logistics. I have the offer letter in my hand. More silence. Fine, 1 week. But you're paying double late fees, and if that paycheck doesn't clear, eviction papers get filed that day. Thank you, really, thank you. The landlord hung up. Daniel sat with the phone in his hand, with Ranger's weight against his legs, and felt the tears come. Not dramatic, not sobbing, just silent tears running down his face while people walked past, pretending not to notice a veteran crying on a park bench. He wasn't sure what he was crying about. Relief, maybe. Or the sheer exhaustion of being 1 day away from homelessness for so long. Or the fact that a stranger had looked at him and seen something worth saving. Ranger pressed closer, doing his job, keeping Daniel grounded while his nervous system caught up with what had just happened. After a while, Daniel wiped his face and stood. He had calls to make. Bill Henderson, to tell him about the job. Linda Morrison, to thank her for the reference. The VA counselor, to share good news for once. But first, he had to go back to Sterling Tower. Victoria's assistant looked surprised to see him return. Mr. Carter, did you forget something? I need to speak to Miss Sterling again. Please. It's important. Michael disappeared, then returned. She can give you 5 minutes. Victoria looked up from her desk when he entered, concern crossing her face. Is everything all right? I can't accept the job. The words hung in the air like a grenade. Victoria set down her pen slowly. I see. May I ask why? Daniel took a breath. This was harder than the interview, harder than showing up in the first place. Because I didn't help you for a reward, he said. I helped you because it was the right thing to do. And if I take this job, if I accept it like this, then it becomes a transaction. You pay me back for being decent, and being decent becomes something I did to get hired. That's not... Please. Daniel stepped forward. I've been trying to get hired for weeks, months, really. I've sent dozens of applications, gone to interviews, gotten rejected over and over, and I never, not once, stopped to help someone first. I just walked past, focused on my own problems. Victoria watched him, her expression unreadable. Monday morning, I helped you because I saw someone who needed help and I could help, Daniel continued. Not because I thought you were important or rich or could give me anything. I didn't even know your name. He pulled out the offer letter, set it on her desk. If I accept this job now, I'm teaching myself the wrong lesson. I'm saying that kindness pays off, that if you help the right people, good things happen. And you don't believe that? I believe kindness is its own payment. Daniel met her eyes. I gave you my shirt because it made a difference in your day. That's enough. That has to be enough, or nothing else matters. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then, Mr. Carter, what would you say if I told you I'd already decided to hire you before I knew you were the man who helped me Monday? Daniel blinked. What? I pulled 12 veteran applications Tuesday morning, before I connected you to the encounter on River Road. I was reviewing them because the board meeting made me realize we'd been too rigid in our hiring criteria. She opened a different folder showing him the notes. Your name was already flagged for an interview. The timeline just happened to accelerate once I realized you were the same person. But you're not getting this job as payment for kindness, Mr. Carter. You're getting it because you're qualified, because your references are excellent, and because I need someone with your skills. She pushed the offer letter back toward him. The shirt was simply the moment that made me look at the files I should have been looking at all along. Daniel stared at the paper. So this isn't charity? This is business. Good business. Hiring good people. Victoria leaned back in her chair. Though I have to say, the fact that you came back to refuse the job because you thought it compromised your integrity, that just confirms I made the right choice. I don't know what to say. Say you'll be here Monday at 8 a.m. Say you'll work hard and look out for your team. Say you'll keep being the kind of person who stops to help strangers in the rain. She smiled. Say anything, but I can't accept this. Daniel picked up the offer letter, his hand steadier now. Monday at 8 a.m. Excellent. Victoria stood, extending her hand. And Mr. Carter? The fact that you are willing to walk away from this because you didn't want to compromise who you are? That's exactly why you belong here. They shook, and this time Daniel believed it. Not charity, not reward, just an opportunity he'd earned by being himself, by staying true to something that mattered more than money. One more thing, Victoria added as he reached the door. I'm instituting a new hiring practice. We're going to bring in a veterans coordinator, someone who understands what service members face when they transition back. Someone who can look past the gaps in certifications to see the person underneath. That's incredible. Consider it a reminder that sometimes the best business decisions come from remembering we're all human first. She gestured at the window at Cedar Ridge below. There are probably 100 Daniel Carters out there right now, good people who just need someone to take a chance on them. I'd like to find more of them. Daniel left for the second time, but now the offer letter felt different in his hands. Not a gift, not luck, just recognition of what he'd always been, even when no one was looking. Outside, the afternoon sun was warm on his face. Ranger trotted beside him, tail high. Daniel pulled out his phone and called Bill Henderson. Bill, it's Daniel Carter. I wanted to thank you for the work this week, but I need to tell you, I got the job, the one I interviewed for. Hey, that's great. Congratulations. Would it be okay if I worked through this afternoon? I'd like to finish out the week. A pause. Then Bill laughed. You got a better offer and you want to keep fixing transmissions for 4 more hours? You took a chance on me. I'd like to finish what I started. You're a good man, Carter. Come finish the Chevy. It'll be here. Daniel went back to Pine Valley Auto Body and lost himself in work that made sense, surrounded by the smell of oil and metal and honest labor. At 6 p.m., Bill handed him another $80 and a handshake that felt like blessing. That night, Daniel cooked rice and vegetables for dinner, splitting it with Ranger like always. But this time he opened his laptop, the one that had died months ago, and plugged it in. To his surprise, it powered on. He pulled up his email and composed a message to Linda Morrison. Dear Linda, I wanted to thank you for everything you've done. The coffee, the quiet space, the reference. I start at Sterling Logistics on Monday. None of this would have happened without your kindness. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Daniel. Then he wrote to his VA counselor, to his old commanding officer, to the 3 friends from his unit who still checked in occasionally. Things are looking up, he told them all. Finally, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Daniel went to sleep without counting dollars or dreading morning. Ranger snored beside the couch, and the apartment was warm, and Monday waited with promise instead of dread. He'd earned this. Not through luck or charity or even kindness. He'd earned it by refusing to let hardship turn him into someone he didn't recognize in the mirror. And that, Daniel thought, as sleep pulled him under, was worth more than any paycheck could ever be.